Okay, I drink, smoke, and have taken a few other drugs. Not regularly, but I have tried them. And I don't categorize myself as an addict because there are some people who are actually addicts. Right out of the gate, there's stigma attached, even though addictive personalities exist, possibly in more persons than not. So if most of us have addictive personalities, which means it's a human trait, how can it be a bad thing?
Big city, the city never sleeps. Word up, look.
Crack is an ugly drug. It's worse than heroin.
The only HIV prevention that's worked across cultures has been banned.
Do you guys like smoke weed when you party?
Yeah.
There's a party drug in like New York called Molly. Do you guys do Molly out here?
Some of them, some of us friends do it.
Like, do you guys like do party drugs?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Do they have like out here? Is like there are a lot of them, or no? It's like because in New York, like it's like a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. Now it starts to be like a good, like it's kind of fashion. So like people do it.
It's a habit, yeah. It's like fashionable.
Yeah.
That's sort of funny because it is like that too in New York. It's sort of like fashionable to. Do you feel like it makes it more fun? Or like, what do you think? Do you think it actually adds to the party or no?
Like she don't take anything, so that's cool for her. She just need to smoke and drink, and that's fun.
Well, do you?
The same, kind of.
OG Kush.
Yeah, but do you feel like the other ones like that makes a difference with the party or?
Yeah, I think so. I think that they need that for like, smile and
Get a papa, baby.
and like chat with everyone. Like,
Do you feel like a lot of people are in the party scene?
yeah.
So you're like a rare exception.
Yeah.
Do you ever feel like pressure?
J'ai vu que je m'en rends compte de plus en plus.
She starts to feel it
You do?
more and more. She
yeah.
don't want anything, but she starts to see
But
everyone.
you
like,
start to think maybe more.
Sorry?
she just started to think that people like around her
Yeah.
take a lot of
Mais ça me dérange
lot
pas.
of them. She don't care, but
Yeah,
she
I
don't
don't
wanna
care.
like.
Yeah.
But you say no.
Yeah, but I don't want that.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Why not?
I
You're
don't
afraid?
like.
You're afraid?
Yeah, I'm afraid, and I just don't like that. I'm smoke a lot of weed, and it's enough for me.
You're afraid
It's not my daily. Ouais, même rien que de mettre dans le nez, tu vois la façon de prendre.
Elle parlait de tout, hein.
Ouais.
bah, ouais,
Très
tout
drogue,
ce qui
ouais,
est
mais
autour,
tout,
autour.
ouais, non, j'aime pas. C'est pas, je sais pas, c'est pas mon délire.
Just smoke
Afraid,
weed,
yeah.
Sarah. Just smoke weed.
Et ça convient
And
pas avec
drink.
ma personne. Comment
It's
je
okay.
peux dire.
That's not.
Genre j'ai mes
that's not-
limites.
That's not me.
My limits.
Do you drink?
Yeah, I drink.
Do you
Drink and smoke.
I do.
Drink and smoke. How were drugs back in the late 70s and early 80s? What was going on then?
We start with all the drugs, organic drugs,
Like?
like marijuana, like hashish, like LSD, like mescaline, like cocaine, like heroin, morphine, opium,
And how did that affect the culture?
shrimps, psilocybin. This is the organic coming directly from a plant.
From a plant, yeah.
And then come the pharmaceutical drugs, And it was the nightmare after, of course.
What was the nightmare?
The nightmare was because you get hooked with heroin and you go wild. Some people, they can't manage it.
They can't. There's no.
Nobody can manage.
Nobody.
There is comeback, but nobody can manage, really. The problem with the drugs, even organic or whatever, is the same problem, is when you get a mind of addict personality, if you get an addict personality, which is most of the case of human being,
Right.
and if you're not conscious of that, you get eaten by the beast,
Right.
In this community that I live in, the guys who are into drugs are using the crystal meth, I think. You know that?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're more into that and marijuana.
Okay, so those aren't really shooting up drugs.
Yeah, and The coke.
The coke.
I don't do any of that stuff. Alcohol is the main reason young people actually get infected, because they sleep around with no condoms, and they tend to get drunk and do crazy stuff.
Okay, so alcohol. It's funny because you usually don't hear about like alcohol and how it relates to the pandemic. You'll hear about drugs and how it relates, but you rarely hear somebody talk about alcohol.
I wouldn't be HIV positive if I hadn't have been a drug addict. I was high when I got positive.
You definitely got it from sex, or?
I had met a dude who was the antithesis of my last boyfriend that I had been with for 10 years. He had dyed blonde hair. He was a punk. He had plugs back in the mid-90s, which nobody had.
Right.
He was tattooed, that was another thing that was kind of new. He was younger than me. He was a total rebel. He was a prostitute. I knew that. It didn't bother me. But I didn't know he was positive, and we had unsafe sex, and we were high on ecstasy, and I let him fuck me. Lately, I've had these 22-year-old best friends, and what I've seen in their world is they're all very knowledgeable about drugs and stuff like that, and they're all very knowledgeable about sex, but even though they have so much information at their fingertips, they're all still so willing and able to make a mistake that could put them into a harmful situation. And I see it more out of sheer boredom. They binge drug, they binge drink, they binge everything. They do everything. I mean, look at song lyrics. Tonight we're gonna live this night as if it's the last night on earth, okay? Every lyric, every song thing is about like burning the candle at both ends and pushing things to the extreme, to the point where like it doesn't matter if you don't wake up tomorrow. It doesn't matter if you die tonight. It doesn't matter, because you're having the best time you're ever gonna have, and it's never gonna be as good as this.
The black body is like a target, man. You feel like endangered, in a way, threatened. And so the best thing to do is to leave your body. Have some alcohol, leave your body. Take some drugs, leave your body. Like the self-saboteur that like exists in all of us. It's like collective. It's like the collective monster, And no matter what you do, you can have white friends, you can go for all kinds of reconciliation, but it's almost like in the air. If you're born into this black body, there's a threat somewhat that you may not succeed. There's a threat somewhat that if you don't kill yourself, someone will kill you.
You just came straight to crack.
Yeah.
Why crack over all other drugs that are on the market, and how is it affecting your community?
Crack is, an ugly, ugly, ugly drug. And I actually think it's worse than heroin, and that's pretty bad. In the crack epidemic is when we really first got started, and it was in the African American community, and it was just terrible. Women were not taking care of themselves. They were giving their babies away. Everybody's looking for that same rock that they got in the beginning and never finding it. And it's cheap, so everybody can do it. Heroin has always been, and probably gonna always be, but with heroin, you've got methadone, and you've got some things to help you with it. With crack, there's not a lot that people can do, and there's not a lot of programs to handle crack.
Right.
Yeah, and that's all over the United States, even in Amsterdam.
2 of my friends' parents died the same way from HIV, and they were heroin users. I first found out that my father was HIV positive when I was about probably 15 years old. I was living in Phoenix, Arizona, and I remembered that my mother told me, and she was hysterical. Because I knew that he was addicted to drugs, I knew that, and he was an intravenous drug user, I knew that that was always possible. So, unfortunately, because of his drug use, we did not have as close of a relationship as, I would have liked us to have. So, he passed away he died, I remember it was August 30th of, I want to say maybe 2005.
You had mentioned that your daughter has AIDS. Do you mind talking with me about the what that meant for you when you found out, or how that happened, or...
Well, I didn't know she had AIDS. See, I was open when I told her I had AIDS. She told me she had AIDS. If I'm laying in a motel like my daughter did, having sex for drugs, then you put yourself in a higher vulnerability for being infected.
Right.
So, I am so proud of her. She has been clean since, I think this is 2008 or 9.
She brought her life back around.
Yes. And doing well. So, she said, "Ma, if I could figure out any way to be happy and not do drugs, I would."
Why do you think you started doing drugs?
To cover up the pain I was feeling, but it didn't make no sense. I mean, you would cut the pain, because it still gonna be there.
Yeah.
You know, and so I just got to start using more and more, and I couldn't stop.
When did you start taking medication?
When I first found out.
Okay, you've been on medications for 22 years now.
Yes.
So even...
Off and on.
Off and on? Yes. Why off and on?
Well, I stopped taking it for so many years. I get back on. I was on drugs. When they get my values down, I go back out using. And I get sick.
And then you go back on.
I go back on.
Did you feel like there was any kind of option for you in terms of mental health support anywhere, or did you feel like there wasn't a support system?
I was so hopeless at that point. I mean, I come from a really dysfunctional background. You know, drugs and alcohol are on all sides of my family, just everywhere. There was a lot of abuse, a lot of sexual trauma in my youth, and I ran away when I was 14. You know, like I've been on drugs and alcoholic since I was 12, and I was so tired. I realized that I was able to help people, you know, with my experiences, and the stuff that I'd gone through didn't necessarily have to destroy me anymore.
What are you transitioning to?
Back on my own.
What do you see back on your own looking like?
You know, I haven't been on my own in 3 years, like since my mom died. And well, January will be 4 years. I don't know, you know? I think back on my own will be finally in sobriety, doing something positive with my life, able to stand on my own 2 feet.
I didn't feel good. I had a horrible thrush in my mouth. My eyes were infected all the time, and I would go pick up and use instead of take my meds to try to make myself feel better. You know, I didn't have to worry about, you know, my secret in a sense. I just was dealing with it.
Today is like, c'est n'importe quoi, c'est un drame absolu. La contamination en prison, elles sont extrêmement nombreuses parce que les gens n'ont pas d'accès à l'échange de seringues. Ils n'ont pas de matériel d'injection qui est propre. Donc les contaminations au VIH et aux hépatites sont énormes aujourd'hui en prison. Ça fait que c'est comme si la France était un pays du Moyen-Âge avec des mesures et une prise en charge des personnes détenues catastrophiques et inhumaines. Donc là aussi encore un groupe, encore une population qui est complètement stigmatisée, oubliée et qui ne profite pas du droit commun. Et sur qui on se permet de faire des choses qui sont absolument intolérables.
a bill that was passed a couple of years ago that allowed the California Department of Public Health to authorize syringe exchange programs in the state in organizations that were already providing services to injection drug users. And there were regulations that had to be written around how we would administer that program, and that's about ready to be rolled out now. There's no funding attached to it, so we don't expect that there'll be a lot of organizations who will be applying, but it's an option for an organization who wants to provide that service to its clients.
Wait, if there's no funding behind it, what is it? That's a ridiculous question, but I guess in my head, how does something exist without funding? And that's coming from somebody who's making a series without funding.
Well, that's the proof. No, you're right. Funding is obviously an important thing. The federal funds can't be used currently for syringe exchange programs. Sometimes there are local funds that are put into syringe exchange programs.
Okay.
Almost no new cases among injecting drug users.
Really?
Because contrary of the United States, we can have needle exchange programs and methadone and buprenorphine everywhere for drug use, and so injection decreased considerably, and there is still a little bit, but it's still higher than the general population, but much, much less than in other countries, or than it was like in the 90s, much less, because we had a really successful harm reduction policy.
Is anybody out there still fighting for clean needle programs? I feel like it's been debated for so long, and is anyone still even trying?
Really, the only HIV prevention that's worked across cultures, across nations, extremely inexpensive, empirically easy to measure, has been banned, but from federal funding in the United States.
For many people who experience hurt, fear, loss, disenfranchisement, and so on, they find release in things like heroin, alcohol, meth. Well, at least at first. Ultimately, these things can become stronger than your will to control them. I'm not trying to preach against drug use. Maybe I should be, but I'm not. What I want is for us to think about where addiction comes from and what the consequences are of turning our backs on addicts.